another episode of Frenchie's Forge. You are here with me inside of Frenchie's Forge lawnmower shed, where I fiddle around with knives and such. Anyway, thank you for tuning back in. Today is going to be a cool episode. This episode is going to be trying to fix a knife that I made. And in fact, looking at the poster board behind us here, you'll notice that the first page I have made 1 through 25 knives, and the very top up here was the little dagger, EDC dagger that I just recently did. That was knife number 26 that I've ever made. So today we're going to be redoing knife number, I want to say this is 11. In fact, I'm not sure what number this is. Let's go over here to the thing and have a look. So here is the list of the knives that I keep track of. The first being a rebar knife that I heat treated. So I've got a check mark over here, and then you'll notice a bunch of non-check marks here until we get down to this one, which is knife number 8. This is a file that I tried to heat treat, and although it got hard, I think the grain is probably incredibly large in this knife. You know, in between these knives here, I don't really know what I'm doing. I'm just kind of messing around, figuring it out as we go. And then if you go down just a couple of more knives, you go to number 11, my mom's paring knife. And that's the one that we're going to be redoing. Now, if you notice up here, I have one that sold. I sold this for $100, and luckily, the owner of this blade did not have me heat treat this blade. So, this blade actually turned out really good. It was made out of a hard file or a farrier's rasp, and I did a ton of cutting tests with it, and it held up really well. This one I know was good, and that's why I was able to sell it. But we're looking back down here at knife number 11. So this would be the third knife that I have ever tried to heat treat all on my own. I remember heat treating this thing, and I remember it being rather hot pretty quickly. I got this thing up to temperature way too fast, I'm sure of it, and dunked it in the oil, and I know it hardened because at the time you could tell I had files, and I would take a file and skate, and it kind of skated for the most part. But then I ended up tempering it. I did all kinds of stuff to it. Long story short, I made this about 6 months ago, maybe somewhere around there, and sharpened it up, gave it to my mom, and she used it as a paring knife. And for the most part, it worked pretty good. And it still works pretty good. Let's see here. Excuse me. So, got a sheet of paper. I just, she brought it back to me because she wanted me to resharpen it. It got a little dull. It got dull within maybe a month of use, which is not super great. So, you know, does it cut? Yeah, kinda. And actually, I, tried to spend a little bit of time thinning this out. It actually had a really nice patina on it from use and stuff. I tried thinning out the blade some. I took some testing files to it to see where it landed, and that's where we ran into our problem. Let me grab this 60 HRC testing file. This I made before I had these, and so there was really no way to test it. It was kind of a dunk it in the oil and cross your fingers method, which I now know is not really good. So let's go ahead and do the 60 HRC up on here. This should be skating over, and although it kind of is, you can tell that it's biting in there. In fact, if we can get it in the right light, I'm sure you'll be able to see, there you go, the scratches in it. So we know that this thing is lower than 60 HRC. Okay, so what if it's 59, 58? Maybe it would still be a pretty okay knife. It just might need to be sharpened a little more. let's grab the 55 HRC file and do the same thing. Actually, let's do it on the other side that doesn't have any scratch marks and do some. So hopefully that's picking it up. It doesn't really look like it is. It's not skating. It is biting a tiny, tiny, tiny bit. So 55 HRC is not acceptable. Just not good. And there's no telling what the grain looks like in here. So in this episode, I thought I would do something I've never done before and thought it'd be really cool to document the process. What I'm going to attempt to do is to heat the blade up, probably with a torch, and let the heat run up into the handle and loosen the epoxy. I am then going to attempt to knock out the pins and take the scales off and get the knife back to bare metal. And then we'll go ahead and try to properly thermocycle it and heat treat it and then put the scales back on it. I'm curious, have you ever done that before? If you're a knife maker out there, have you ever attempted to do this? What is the best way to do it? I don't really know. And in fact, I haven't really even looked up any information online or searched any videos. I'm assuming that this would be the proper way to do it. We're going to have to reheat treat this, so putting heat to it is going to be a big deal. And it makes sense to me to get the epoxy to loosen up to add some heat. So stick with me, find out here in a minute when we go to do that, and we'll see if we can get these scales off the knife. Let's do it. So there we have it. One knife handle removed. And by golly, that was a bit of a chore. Get the camera to focus there. And as you can see, definitely had to heat up the blade portion enough to get the heat to travel up this thing. It was pretty easy getting the front off because the heat source was right there. And then as we tried to move towards the middle, and not so well, that's when I started to break the scales a little bit. And then just kind of jimmying it back and forth with a combination of this little pick here and a flathead screwdriver did the trick. Like I said in the beginning, this is something that we're going to have to reheat treat anyway. So I'm not, really worried at all about what we did with the heat. I was more so trying to save the handle scales because that was one thing that my mom said she really liked. Not only the look, but that they were also super comfortable. So I wanted to try to preserve those. Anyway, I think mission accomplished for getting them off. I think I'll be able to salvage them. We'll be able to put them back together and put them back on this knife once we get the heat treat done on it. So let's go ahead and jump to doing that, and then we'll move on from there. All right, so there we go. We got the blade thermocycled and quenched properly. I went ahead and removed the decarb layer off of this side here, which I plan on thinning it out a little bit more anyway. But to remove the decarb layer, we now have a 60 HRC file, and running it across the clean metal here, we can tell that it is skating, so that is good. That's what we wanted, which is definitely going to be way better than the 55 that it was. So there we go. Now we got this blade fixed up. The only thing left to do is to clean this thing back up. I am going to spend a little bit more time thinning it out some, and I'll probably raise the actual edge up some to remove some of this, because it was really thin, and I'm afraid that if I leave the cutting edge where it was, some of that may still have decarb on it. So I'll probably go ahead and profile the edge back down, you know, maybe a 1/16 of an inch or so, just to make it a wee bit more skinny, so that we can make sure that we're getting to the good metal, and then go back in and thin out the bevels and put an edge on it and get it ready to put the handles back on it. So let's do it. It's the next day, and got the clamps off of here, and the glue up went pretty well. I was able to salvage the handle and get it back to the condition that it was. Luckily, when I was pulling the pins out, none of this really broke. The segments just kind of peeled away from one another. But yeah, it's pretty much a success. So now at least we know it's doable. You can take a knife and remove handles that are epoxied on, and pretty successfully. At least the way that I did it. You wouldn't want to do this if you're not wanting to reheat treat the blade. Let's say perhaps the blade is perfect but the handle broke or something. Then I would take a different route on how I did it. I'd probably just try to cut away the scales, or do it somehow where I'm not introducing heat. But because that wasn't a big deal, this method worked pretty good. So hopefully that helps somebody out there. Hopefully you don't find yourself in that predicament where you make a knife and it didn't turn out great. But like I said in the beginning, this was a early on knife, and knowing what I know now and what I've learned, I know that it doesn't surprise me that this happened. I was still in the process of learning. So anyway, let's go ahead and get the epoxy off of here, and we're gonna retouch up the handle, get it back to good condition, and then we'll continue kind of thinning out the blade a little bit, putting an edge on it, and then we're going to do some testing with it to see if all of this effort was in vain, or if it actually did what I'd hoped it do. Did what I hoped it do what I hoped it did. You know what I'm trying to say. Let's do it. All right, so there you go. We have one completed paring knife. I was able to take off the scales, save them, reheat treat this blade, thin it out, put a new edge on it, and salvage the scales and put them back on. So it was a lot of effort, but if it holds up over time and it doesn't require as much sharpening, then it's totally worth it. I know my mom really liked this knife. I like it. It's a classic, and hopefully it will remain so by cutting a little bit better now. Anyway, no, it was kind of a short video, but appreciate you watching. Let me know in the comments what you think and what you'd like to see next. Until next time, we'll catch you later.